Hello everyone and welcome to the explanation video for Astro Invaders. Now the screen behind me is unlit, and the reason that is the case is because all the floodlights create a lot of lag, and for talking about some of the circuitry, I figured I probably shouldn't have that on just so I can actually fly around and show things properly. Now there are a lot of segments to this. For example, we have our whole game board that handles alien movement. Down here is player movement. We have our animations, scorekeeping, player actual trigger movement. Our difficulty is over here, as well as our game clock and all that. So we're only going to talk about a few select things just because there are many videos that I've already put out on some of these other topics, as well as the fact of not keeping this video, an hour long. I figured I might as well only pick a few of them and kind of highlight how I made those work. And the first of which is actually our scoreboard. Now our scoreboard is a type of circuit that I've covered a few times before, where we have our standard increments where we have our signal come through to open up one of these, and depending on which switch we're currently on, we just move to the next one, and then move to the next one, and then move to the next one. And each of these basically trigger a button that displays the proper number on screen. So I've talked about this type of circuit quite a bit. However, what I have not talked a lot about is the actual reset mechanics. Now, part of this game is a reset mechanism on the scoreboard. So when this button is pressed, no matter what score the board is at, the scoreboard will reset back to 0, 0, 0. It does actually take a moment to do so, however, because of the way that I have this done. In order to do the reset, we open up this switch. This is going to be a sensor switch, so don't worry about this right now, but we actually open up our enable. This switch is currently open already because as soon as we open up this switch, we want to begin our reset process. And what happens is we trigger this power sensor, which is on power gained mode. If I could show that, it's on power gained mode. And we essentially just increment our score. This goes over to this button, which just increments our score. It also closes up this switch, so we lose power to the power sensor, and after two ticks, we then open up the switch again, re-trigger this power sensor, and increment our score again. So essentially, this is just an infinite loop as long as this is open to reset our score. This sensor, however, is actually what we use to determine where to stop. Right over here, this is our trigger that actually resets the game board back to 0. So when we hit 0, we have power flow through here, and we actually use this to close off our enable so we no longer increment the score anymore. So once we hit 0, we stop incrementing, and then we actually move to the next one. And then we just have two copies of the exact same thing, where we increment this one all the way to 0, trigger the next one, increment this one all the way to 0, trigger the next one, and then increment this all the way to 0. The reason we cannot do these all at the exact same time is because when this one hits 0, it actually defaults to trigger this one once. So, when we hit 9 and then go once, it'll go to 10. If we hit 19, it'll go to 20. So because of that, we have to start at our least significant digit, go to our medium significant digit, and then our most significant. And that's just due to the mechanics of having to reset. Now that we've talked a little bit about the scoreboard, I do want to talk about the most fundamental thing to this entire game, which is our difficulty and our game clock. Now everything up here, this is all alien movement. This is super complex, but I will do my best to give an explanation of it in just a moment. However, that is all run off of this little circuit right here, which granted is not super little and is not super simple either. Now when the game starts, you'll notice that all these switches are off, and when the game starts, we actually open up this set of switches and open up this set of switches. Now right here, this handles our difficulty. You'll notice that this is the only switch out of all of these second row of switches that is open. And that is because this tells us that we are starting on our easiest difficulty. When we want to change difficulties, we'll turn this off and turn this one on. This will take us to medium difficulty. We'll turn this off, we'll turn this one on, this will take us to hard, and then this one will take us to EXO. Now this over here is just how we handle the difficulty change. Now this was basically implemented because I needed to allow the player to be able to change the difficulty as well. I'm not really going to cover this because it's just unnecessarily complex and I definitely could have done it simpler, but essentially that's how we change difficulties. So we can change difficulties by the player triggering a button to change the difficulties manually, or when we destroy the proper amount of aliens by triggering these count repeaters. These count repeaters are set to 2 and then 4, so this is a total of 8. And once that is enough, we trigger our delay repeater, which then turns our difficulty from easy to medium. On the medium difficulty, when we kill 4 and then 3, so 12 aliens, we then move to the hard difficulty. And when we destroy 6 and 3, which is 18 aliens, we then move to XO. So as we destroy an increasing number of aliens, we change our difficulty level. And the reason we chose to cover the difficulty first is because depending on which difficulty we were on, we open up a switch leading to a specific delay repeater. So this switch over here is for easy, medium, hard, XO. The easy switch has a tick rate of 25 cycles. The medium has 21, hard is 14, and then XO is 10. So as we start going up in the difficulties, our tick rates start going down. And the reason this is important is because this determines how fast our aliens move, how fast we generate them, and where they all go. This is how I implemented the increasing difficulty feature of Astro Invaders, where all these ticks, basically what they do is they trigger this switch over here, which handles the transitions of all of our games, essentially. It will reopen up all these switches, so we have a constant loop of constantly triggering our delay repeaters to therefore have an infinite cycle, while also triggering this button and then this switch. And the reason that I do this is because this button triggers the game clock for the game clock switch for all of our aliens, and then this power sensor, when this opens up, it receives power, it then triggers our button repeater again, and then it turns off this. So this once again is also an infinite loop, and that allows us to close off the tick. So essentially we turn it on, the power sensor receives a signal basically a fraction of an instant later and turns it off pretty much immediately. It is still enough to give us a brief flash of power to allow the aliens to increment into their specified location based on what their position is reading. However, it doesn't do it super long, so we don't move twice or we don't generate more aliens than we need to. We need this to be basically as instantaneous as possible, and this circuit allows that to happen while still allowing us to read a pulse. So with that being said, let's now start our discussion on how we generate our aliens. Generating our aliens is a little bit complex. Essentially, we only need to pay attention to right here. When we have a signal come through that we want to generate our alien, we trigger this button and open up this first row of switches. This second row of switches is caught in an infinite loop of delay repeaters to constantly be toggling which one is open. And the reason that's beneficial is because this gives us our random aspect. If any given instant in time, when we generate a new alien, a hopefully random location will be open, and then we'll generate an alien associated with whichever location is open. And as you can see, there are 2 delay repeaters for each. The reason is the second delay repeater is on a 1 cycle delay. There were times where if we caught the transition from one switch to another, we actually could generate 2 aliens instead of 1, which is not what we're trying to do. And because of that, I had to add in a 1 tick delay between the closing of one switch and the opening of the next one, so that actually prevented us from generating multiple aliens. We only generate 1 every single time we require 1, which is the intended behavior. And the reason that this is somewhat random is because this is on, I believe, like a 15 cycle, 12 cycle total to go from the start to the end. And the reason that's important is because if you remember, our game clock ticks need to be offset slightly. If our game clock is mirrored to how fast we're generating an alien, every single time we request an alien, it will be in the exact same position every single time. And that is not what we're looking for. We need to make sure that we are offset, not doubled, not tripled. It has to be a less than 1 cycle offset in order for this to be a new alien position every single time we request one. And when we do request one, we have it flow through a power sensor and then trigger a delay repeater, which after 3 cycles will move our aliens. After 3 cycles, we'll then place the new one to actually create a new alien on the board. Now these ones are all going to random positions. I don't remember which one goes to which. This is our far right switch, but it actually goes to our middle right alien, which would be in this channel. Our center one, I don't actually know where this one goes, but it goes onto one of these switches. It's not the middle one, it probably is like the far left one or something like that, and that just adds a little bit more to the randomness by having them go to various random locations. Now that we know a little bit about how the aliens are generated, we can actually start talking about how we actually handle the aliens themselves. So starting with the top set of Qt RTGs, the RTG on the right handles our alien and what we want to do with it. So when this switch opens up, it turns on this power sensor, and this power sensor primarily, aside from another feature I'll describe in a moment, turns on our alien on the game board. So for example, if I were to flip this switch right now, and then I were to go and take a look real fast, we would see that our alien now exists on the board. and that's because that just triggers all the buttons that turns the alien on. This is the switch that tells us, do we have an alien in this position or not? And the reason that this is beneficial is because you'll also notice that these two switches on our other two QTRTGs are toggling. These two switches are tied to, do we have an alien here or not? When this is closed, we don't have an alien here. That means that a bullet turns on these two switches. When a player fired bullet hits this location, we see that, okay, we don't have an alien here by going through this channel. What we're gonna do is we're gonna turn off the bullet, and then we're going to increment the bullet and turn on the bullet on the next alien. Unfortunately, because this is the top, we don't actually turn on the next alien, so we just turn off this bullet. But essentially, normally what we would do is we would turn on the bullet on top of the current location. If we do have an alien here, power now flows through this channel, and when we do have a bullet occur, we basically say, okay, we have an alien here. We now also have a bullet here. Let's turn off both of them. Cool, that's it. We basically turn off the alien, we turn off the bullet, and then we also increment our score because we effectively have killed an alien. Now, the other thing that I do want to mention is when we do have an alien in this location, power flows through far enough to reach this second power sensor. So when this switch triggers, this is actually our game clock switch. So as I mentioned, we turn it on very, very quickly, and then we turn it off pretty much instantaneously to only give a flicker of power to this power sensor. And the reason that we only need a flicker is because what we do is we actually end up figuring out where we want to move the aliens. And that is what these three sets of QTRTGs and switches handle down here. Do we want to move down the center? Do we want to move to the right? Or do we want to move to the left? You'll notice that this is very similar to how we generate a random alien. We have a set of delay repeaters that are constantly cycling which location we are theoretically going to be moving the alien in. Once again, there is a 1 tick delay just to prevent two switches from being opened pretty much instantaneously and then causing two aliens to come from one. We don't want that to happen. There is a higher priority to go down the center. As you can see, this is on a 23 cycle. This one is only on a 3, and this one's only on a 4. That means that we are prioritizing going down the center, although there is a very, very small chance that the alien could move to the left or right if the switch happens to be in that position. So when we trigger our game clock, we actually open up these bottom 3 switches. And opening up these bottom 3 switches then triggers the power sensor only where this current channel is open, and that again moves down to the center, this moves to the right, this moves to the left. We then close off all these switches to prevent another alien from occurring, and then we basically turn off our alien position. So we turn it off from being up top, and then we turn it on in, again, wherever we decide to move. And that's how we actually cascade the aliens all throughout the system. So that generally is pretty much how Astro Invaders work. There are other things that I haven't covered. This is the movement mechanism, which, you know, if we want to move to the right, we turn on a button that triggers our right blocks. If we want to move to the left, we turn on a button that triggers our left blocks and whatnot. This is something that I've covered in other videos before. This is the player movement. The player movement was a little bit unique because depending on which sensor field you touch, that will allow you to move either to the left or to the right based on what button you press on the rover. And if you trigger the same sensor field multiple times, it doesn't actually change anything. It just constantly sits there, which is why I kind of had to have some specialty circuitry. I'm not really going to cover because it's not super important. It's not anything unique. I added delays to shooting so that you can't spam it. You have to wait at least, like, I think it's like 1 or 2 ticks before you can then shoot again. This is our reset. Our reset is unnecessarily complex, and I just threw that out there. That's how we start games and all that type of stuff. So there is a lot more that I haven't explicitly covered, but again, for the sake of keeping this video relatively reasonably long, I decided to only focus on some of the key aspects that will allow you to understand how Astro Invaders works. So hopefully you guys found this interesting. I know it is very, very complex and very, very technical. I obviously can give as best of an explanation as I can, but this is something that I have made myself so I understand fundamentally how it works, and I'm hoping that I can kind of translate that to some of you guys, so maybe you can understand at least where I'm coming from. But that being said, the goal is just to show you some cool things that you can do in Astroneer. It's just to show you these are the limits of what Astroneer is capable of, and let's continue to push them even farther. So hopefully this inspires you maybe to do some circuitry of your own if you have a really cool idea, or at least give it an attempt if you are interested. But for the most part, this is just to demonstrate something cool that I put a lot of time into. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. Make sure you have a good rest of your day, evening, and or night, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like this one. Oh, and actually before we end, the save is also available in the description. Don't forget to check out the video on the release as well, because that gives you a little bit more instructions on actually how to play. So, as I was saying, have a good rest of your day, everyone, and we'll see you in the next video.